Good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome to the Faculty of Engineering Graduate Studies Ask Me Anything event for the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. My name is Sarah Landy. I am the Manager of Graduate Operations for the Faculty of Engineering, and I will be your host for today's event. During today's event, we will be hearing from faculty, current students, and admission experts from the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. We encourage you to use the Q&A button within your webinar screen to submit any questions you have about our graduate programs for our panelists. You can also upvote questions submitted in the Q&A chat by clicking on the thumbs up icon. This shows us that many students are interested in the answer to that question. Within the chat, my colleagues Catherine, Jen, and Emily will be answering questions you have, as well as sharing some helpful links, so keep your eyes out for them. This event is being recorded and all information is current as of November 2nd, 2021. So let's get started. I'd like to hand it over to our panelists now. So please welcome Professor Kankar Bhattacharya from the Associate Chair for the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're located. So let us go with the presentation which we have here prepared. So this is our, I will present a part of this presentation and then we'll pass it on to my colleagues. So the first part of which I'll be focusing on is the department overview. So the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department at the University of Waterloo is one of the largest departments in North America. The largest engineering departments. We have 2,500 undergraduate students, more than 800 graduate students, 50 staff members, and 90 faculty members. It is as large as some engineering colleges in some countries. And it is one of the largest engineering departments in Canada, and not only Canada, in North America. We have 14 state-of-the-art research areas, which include all you can possibly think of in the areas of electrical and computer engineering. In the MH program, we have 7 specializations. So the research areas apply to the PhD and MSc programs, and the MH program we are offering 7 specializations as listed here. All of them are in the very topical and current areas of interest where the job opportunities exist, like in artificial intelligence, machine learning, biomedical engineering, computer networking, software, energy, and so on, nanoelectronics. So these are all very high demand subjects, and our research labs are world class, and we have some research centers which bring together a lot of faculty members and industries and other agencies together, such as the Waterloo Institute of Nanotechnology, Waterloo Institute of Sustainable Energy, and so on. Please move to the next one. So our department, we offer several graduate programs. In fact, we offer 7 graduate programs. As you see here in PhD program, we have 3 different options. One is the regular PhD in electrical and computer engineering, and then we have 2 collaborative options. One is the nanotechnology collaborative, and the other is quantum information collaborative PhD. In MSc, again, we have 3 options. One is the regular electrical and computer engineering MSc, and collaborative nanotechnology and collaborative quantum information. We have a course-based MH program and MH program in electric power engineering, which is an entirely online program, which is typically geared for power industry personnel. So this is the MH Power is the original online program, which has been online from the year 2003, and the other MH program is a in-class program, which is the MH in electrical and computer engineering. The number of students in each of these programs, as of now, you can see here, we have a large body of graduate students, 267 active PhD students, 150 research masters, and 421 course-based master students. So we are a very active and dynamic graduate program in the university. Our faculty members are very well recognized worldwide. we have 21 active IEEE fellows in the department. So active means they are means not counting the ones who have retired or no longer are with us. 21 of our faculty members are active IEEE fellows, 10 Canadian Academy of Engineering fellows, 4 Royal Society of Canada fellows, and 19 researchers. So this is to basically emphasize that our faculty members are widely recognized, not only within Canada, but internationally in their respective areas of research. Our research grant, only our department itself brings in $24 million per year. And it's a kind of increasing number. So every year it keeps increasing by 1 or 2 percentage points. Our research areas, as I said before, we have 14 recognized areas. Recognized means which is the government recognized research areas. And these are the centers which we have basically located within our department: the Center for Advanced Photovoltaic and Display Systems, Intelligent Antenna and Radio Systems, Integrated Radio Frequency Engineering, Pattern Analysis and Machine Intelligence, Giga to Nanoelectronics, and High Voltage Engineering. So these are experimental facilities, world-class facilities, which provides students that experience to work with top infrastructure and top research faculty members. And at what point is it? Which slide number? Can I see this? Is there a slide number here? Okay, I think this will be my probably last slide. So as I said before, breadth is our strength. These are the 14 areas. So what we mean by 14 areas is that when you are as a research master or research PhD student, you are enrolled in our programs. These are the 14 areas which will be offered to you to register for officially, and this will determine your selections of the courses, particularly because there are some regulations that you have to undertake core courses in those areas. So if you are a student with a registered with a specified field, that power and systems, you have to undertake core courses in that area, or similarly, if it is in computer hardware, you have to do core courses from computer hardware, and other courses you can take as electives. So these are basically accredited research areas of the department. Apart from the institutes which I mentioned before, just 1 minute in the previous slide, apart from the institutes which I mentioned in the previous slide, there are several other institutes in the university. For example, Waterloo AI Institute, or WISE, and so on, or WIN, which are central facilities of the university where our department also participates. So we will take the questions at the end, I think. So I will pass on to the next speaker, who will provide you with the perspective of other aspects of graduate studies. So thank you.
Okay, I'll take on from here to just briefly share the story from a graduate student perspective. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cindy, and I'm currently a PhD student in ECE with specialization in quantum information. I completed my undergraduate study here at Waterloo as well in nanotechnology engineering. So I actually started my graduate study as a master's and transferred into a PhD just earlier this term. So this is an option, and I personally quite prefer that. So the broad field of my research is in microwave quantum optics with superconducting quantum devices. For me, it was the extensive co-ops and undergraduate research assistantships that guided me towards my research interests and shaped my research ambitions. So I would really recommend anyone who has the opportunity to take advantage of internships and URAs. It's great if you can find what you love doing, but it's also really important to rule out what you don't like doing early on. And next slide, please. So regarding my research, I am under the supervision of Professor Chris Wilson. When deciding on the graduate study, I personally prioritize the supervisor and the community that I'm about to study in. So since I was at Waterloo at the time of application, I had easy access to interview with profs and visiting their labs here. So it's really good to get to know the team, the group dynamics, and as well as the environment you'll be working in. So my project is on coupling of superconducting qubits to a topological waveguide. And Chris and I came to this research topic together, mainly from like my expressive interest upon literature reviews, such as journal club meetings and such. So Chris allows full flexibility in my research and working hours. So we do have weekly one-on-ones and he's very supportive whenever his professional help is needed, but otherwise I go solo on my own research project. So since the working hour is really flexible, I might be on the side of working slightly under hours, which I don't speak for others on this one. But yeah, so my research work involves simulation and design, device fabrication in the clean rooms, dilution, fridge, and microwave network setup, and microwave measurements. So as my project relies on experiments, I do have to be on campus and in the laboratory to actually make good progress on my own research. Next slide, please. So in addition to the research component, I have quite a bit of other activities going on. So my first year of graduate study was in the middle of the pandemic. So I decided to prioritize courses over research. And regardless of which graduate program you take on, you would have some course requirements. So my first year was mainly just focusing on courses and I was working mostly remotely. And in addition, I typically do TAs 2 out of the 3 terms. So teaching assistantship would provide you with a little bit of some additional funding. And it's also really good to be able to help the undergraduate students as well as to further develop and improve your teaching abilities. I am currently also taking on the roles of ECE GSA chair and Waterloo GSA counselor, which are the 2 official graduate student organizations, and we aim to assist students academically, socially, and mentally. So you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And lastly, if you have any questions, we do have a short Q&A session at the end, but you can also feel free to reach out to me via the ECE GSA email. Thank you.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Chris. So I'm going to talk a little bit about admissions. There's a lot of slides to get through, so I know you have questions, so I'll try to not dawdle too much. Okay, so when you're applying, what would an ideal applicant look like? Now, I want to mention this is an ideal applicant. These aren't necessary conditions for you to get in, but just kind of what would be the perfect person. So certainly you want strong marks in your last 2 years. If you're an international student, we do look at your full 4-year degree marks, but we want to see strong marks in the last 2 years. It's important to have good reference letters. So 2 strong reference letters for a master's, 3 for a PhD. You should be able to comment on your current research ability as well as your research potential. Ideally, the reference would have worked with you in some sort of URA project, as Cindy was mentioning, some undergraduate research. Or they know you from courses, capstones, and so on. You can also have some professional references, but one of them must be academic for master's and 2 for a PhD. Ideally, you would have had some university research experience. You kind of know what it's like to do research in a lab or at a university environment. So you can be a full-time research internship you may have done, or even a part-time research while you're taking courses. Ideally, you have some notion of what you like, what you would think you might be interested in if you're applying for the MASc or the PhD program. It doesn't need to be the same area where you've done your undergrad research, but it could be. Ideally, if you've identified a professor you would like to work with and you know something about what they do, right? You're not just shooting in the dark. And you also know something about, what are the current topics of interest in that research area. Ideally, if you're a domestic student, you will have applied for an NSERC scholarship. We'll talk more about that later. And that you kind of have clear long-term goals, right? You kind of know what you want to get out of doing a master's degree or a PhD. Okay, some advice. I think Kankar touched on some of this, but ECE has a lot of breadth in research, right? So really think about what you find interesting and then look for profs that do research in that area. Definitely visit professors' personal website and or read their recent papers to kind of get an idea of what they're working on. And when you apply for a master's and PhD student, or for MASc and PhD student, be sure to indicate who you would like to work with, right? Some profs, when they're looking for students, their first filter will be to only look for students that mention their name in their application. So this is very important. And, you know, this is a bit of a tricky one because a lot of people do contact professors, but it's a good idea to contact them or at least try to reach out to them to see if they're interested in working with you. You know, you can try to email them or phone them. When you do email them, though, be careful, right? Like you want to make it a little bit more personal. Don't make it a generic email. So for example, I often see emails to me where my name has been clearly copy and pasted. It's in a different font, right? So that doesn't really work that well. Okay, when you're applying to external scholarships, some of these are for domestic. So NSERC would be for domestic students. That application deadline is around December 1st, I believe, for a master's student. If you need to request a transcript, that's usually a bit earlier, so you can check that out there. For OGS, which is the Ontario Graduates Scholarship, this is open to both domestic and international students. The transcript request deadline is around February 1st, and you want to submit your application around the same time, February 1st. Okay, so these are external scholarships that, you know, you're strong students, you're applying to a strong graduate program, you would be very competitive for these scholarships, and you should definitely strongly encourage you to apply for them. Okay, the PhD program. So the way it typically will work is in your first year, you'll take courses, and those would be 4 courses overall. You are expected to come up with original novel research, okay? The culmination of all your work over 4 years, 12 terms, is a thesis, right? So this thesis is sort of a record of all the work all the discoveries you've made, I guess, along the way. And of course, it's an expectation that you're disseminating your research in, you know, reputable venues along the way as well. You can do your PhD full-time or part-time, but it's not a unilateral decision, right? If you want to do something part-time, both you and your supervisor have to agree to that. The Masters of Applied Science program is ideal for a recent graduate or professional who wants to expand their engineering knowledge through advanced study and research. There's a research component. So here again, you'll take 5 courses. I would say most students take those in their first year of their master's. Again, there's an original research component. The scope of the original research is typically less than a PhD. So for example, it could be a novel application as opposed to a novel, you know, theory or idea. There's a thesis at the end. It's 2 years. So typically, like I said, first year will be courses. Second year, you'll be mostly full-time doing research. And once again, you can do it full-time or part-time, but it's not unilateral, right? It's kind of a mentorship program. You're working directly with a faculty advisor. They're working with you. And so they have to agree to make it a part-time study. There is minimum research funding, which is $18,000 per year for an MASc student. Now, the MEng program, as Kankar mentioned, is a course-based master's, and it's ideal for recent graduate or professional seeking advanced training to enhance and strengthen a career in the field of engineering. So because it's a course-based degree, there's more courses, 8 of them in total. This you can do full-time or part-time, and here it is a unilateral decision, right? So if you want to do it part-time, it's completely up to you. If you're doing it full-time, it's typically between 1 to 2 years, 3 to 6 terms. And as mentioned earlier, there's a specialization. So what that entails essentially is that of those 8 courses, a subset of them are taken from a pre-approved list in the various areas that Kankar mentioned before. So for example, computer software, you know, has a specialization. So this is a nice way to sort of tailor your degree or focus your degree as to what you're studying during an MEng. You have the opportunity to take our ECE 699 project and afterwards apply for the PhD in ECE. So you can go do an MEng and then do a PhD. 699 is sort of like a mini thesis. You work again with a faculty advisor on a research project. The scope, of course, is more narrow given the time constraints, but it's kind of a mini thesis. You can think of it that way. And MEng students are entirely self-funded, so there is no funding from advisors or the department. Okay, so we've been really trying to increase the funding available for domestic students. And so there's lots of awards available for you when you apply, and you don't need to do any extra applications to be eligible for these awards. So there's up to 100 entrance awards valued at around 5,000 each. There are very prestigious fellowships valued between 25 and 30K per year. So that would fund your studies. And then if you are successful in getting one of those aforementioned external scholarships, like NSERC and OGS, there are top-ups from the university. So you'll get the money from the external agency plus more from the university. So it's worth your while, certainly financially, to apply for those external scholarships. And as mentioned by Cindy, you have the option to do a teaching assistantship, both international and domestic students. It's not a requirement, but it's, I think it's a nice part of doing graduate studies, right? You get to see the other side of the teaching enterprise, right? You're on the teaching side of things. Yep. So we really worked to make sure that our international PhD students, which are very important to our program, receive equal funding. Okay, so that means that you receive the minimum GRS, as I mentioned before, I think 24K for PhD student, but then you also receive a International Doctor Student Award, IDSA, which essentially means that, after tuition, domestic and international students are receiving the same amount, right? So you basically are receiving the same money in pocket, even though the tuitions are a little bit different between domestic and international. So I mentioned before, there's a top up. If you are successful in getting these external scholarships, the university will top you up. So you'll get even more money, right? And I should mention, actually, this is all tax-free. So if you are a domestic student, the federal government will not take this money from you. So it's actually quite a bit of in your pocket. And so you receive an additional 10 to 20,000 in funding from the university. And so it also looks very good on a resume, right, to receive these awards. There's a new scholarship that was introduced very recently, the Indigenous and Black Engineering and Technology Momentum Fellowship. Okay, so these are for underrepresented groups in engineering, and it will provide financial support for $25,000 per year for 4 years for the recipients, and an additional $5,000 a year top up from your advisor. Okay, and there's a link for more details. Waterloo, our EC in Waterloo is quite unique in that we admit 3 terms per year. There's the big one, which is fall. That's where the majority of our students come in. But then we also admit students in the winter, starting in January, and the spring, starting in May. So there's some flexibility as to when you start your degree. In terms of deadlines, if you want to start in the fall, so September, you want to apply by February 1st. That is the deadline. If you want to start in January, you need to apply in June of the year before. And finally, if you want to start in May, the spring term, you need to apply in October of the year before. And a complete application package consists of, all your, information, your OUAC application, an essay sort of describing your research interests. That's the supplementary information form. A resume, very important. 2 references, what I mentioned before, one of them at least being academic. Transcripts from all previous education, right? So if you went to a university for 1 term and you transferred, we need to see that transcript from that 1 term. If you come from a university that is not teaching in English or is not approved from English language exemptions, you must take an English language proficiency exam, okay, and meet the minimum requirements. So basically you have to be proficient in English. And if applicable, you need to show proof that you're a permanent resident. Okay, so this is my last slide. The application process. So I mean, you're probably quite familiar with this, but let me remind you. You apply online and you pay your fees through the Graduate online application system. And you fill out all the relevant information, including the referee contact information. Okay, and apply 2 to 4 weeks before the deadline, because what's going to happen is you're going to apply, and then your references are going to get notified to write a letter. So there'll be some lag there between when you apply and when the references kind of complete their letters. Okay, so it's a good idea to apply early. You want to create your Waterloo student account on our internal system called Quest. And then you want to upload all the required documents I mentioned before, including that little essay, the SIF. And then 1 or 2 business days after you've completed the online application and the fee has been processed, you will receive an email with instructions for claiming your user ID and password, as well as how to get access to our system. And then Quest will be sort of your main interface for seeing when you get an offer, seeing kind of, that's how we'll communicate to you basically on the application process. So Quest will be one of the system you'll be applying to or working with. For more information, you can check out the link below. And with that, I will stop talking. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to all of our presenters. It's time to begin our Q&A session. So as a reminder, continue to submit your questions using the Q&A button within the webinar screen and upvote any questions that you would like to hear the answer to. Our first question I'm going to direct to our student panelist, Cindy. Cindy, if you had one piece of advice to offer students who are applying right now, what would you tell them?
Okay, so I think as you apply, do check out our faculty list and have list a few professors that, well, if it's MEng, then make sure you read all the requirements and understand if you're interested in any specific specializations. If you're considering the research programs, then yeah, list a few professors that you're interested in working with, and as you submit your application, do reach out to them, because check their own research websites. They might indicate their availability at the moment if they're hiring, but some professors might not update the website very frequently, so it's usually not a hassle to don't be afraid to reach out to professors. If they're at full capacity, they will just reply to you saying that they're at full capacity, but otherwise it doesn't hurt checking if they have any opening at the moment. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. Anshul, I know you had a different journey to your studies. Is there anything, a piece of wisdom that you would like to impart upon our prospective applicants?
Just what Cindy went, I would just like to add that if you are planning for a course-based program like for an MINT, then at Waterloo we have a lot of courses which are wide, have a lot of variety, so you can choose your courses based on what kind of professional or academic career you want to build on. Yeah, so you have a lot of variety, so go through the course outlines thoroughly and select your courses based on what kind of particular field you want to choose. And if you want to go towards research based, then yes, reach to the professors and their other already pursuing students. You can have a better idea of how the particular research and the group is working towards.
Wonderful, thank you both. Kankar, for the last almost 2 years at this point, we've been learning online. Students are wondering if classes will be done online or in person for the fall 2022 intake. Oh, you're on mute, Kankar.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm not an astrologer, but we expect things will improve. We are going back to the classroom from January 2022. So by September, we are definitely hoping that things will be very close to normal. So at this point, our prediction is yes, we will be having in-class courses. Our plan is to start from January itself.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. Thank you for that insight. Chris, you talked a little bit about admissions and what we'd like to see in the most ideal applicant. Can you talk a little bit about how competitive the programs are, and if somebody has maybe like a 74.55 instead of a 75, can they still be considered for admission? How does that work?
Okay, it's a good question. I would say it's quite competitive. Certainly the MASC and the PhD and the MEng, there's a lot of applicants, right? I guess I'll distinguish a little bit here between the research degrees and the non-research degrees. Because the research degrees are you work directly with a faculty member, it's very much about that relationship between you and the advisor. So if you have this 74.5%, but you have an advisor who really wants to work with you because maybe you did an undergraduate research experience really in their area, they can justify, accepting you as long as they can show that, you'd be you would be successful doing that type of research. So there, it can happen, but it's sort of about the relationship that you might establish between you and the potential advisor. On the MEng side, I would say that you're probably not very likely to get accepted if you're below 74 point, if you're below 75, because it's, there's a lot of applicants. And so for the most part.
For MEng, I would say anything below 80 is very difficult.
Yeah.
And it is going higher. So closer to 85 is our cutoff.
And so for the MAC, it's also competitive, but there again, if you're able to establish a relationship, then you might still be able to get it. But it's very competitive. It is competitive.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. I have some questions about references here. Pavneet, maybe as our admissions expert, you can answer these for us. The first question is, what if someone is unable to get an academic reference, given that they've been outside of academia for over a decade? Is that a deal breaker?
So usually what happens is when we get these sort of requests, like if an applicant is out of school for over a decade, we forward those requests to our associate chair, and then they kind of either approve those requests or either deny those requests. So we go for them on case-to-case basis, going through the applicant's background, like for how long they've been out of school. If it's around 8 or 10 years, we usually approve these sort of requests, like accepting 2 professional references.
Okay, so the student's best course of action would be to contact our admission experts directly and work with them on a case-by-case basis. Excellent. Thank you very much. So Pavneet, another question kind of, again, on admissions. Are applicants shortlisted on a rolling basis? Like, is it first come, first serve? When do students expect to hear decisions based on when they've applied?
So the applications are not reviewed on first come, first serve basis. We start accepting applications, and then once the deadline is over, after that we start reviewing, start evaluating them and release them. So the applications are not evaluated on first come, first basis. We thoroughly review every application very we go into very detailed review process to review every aspect of the application, considering their work experience and their educational academic background, and to see that if they meet the minimum requirements or not. So there's a whole process involved in reviewing the applications. So usually after the application submission deadline, it usually takes a time period of around, I would say, approximately 2 months. After that, applicants can expect a decision from us.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Kankar, if a student is admitted to the MEng program and they find a supervisor once they arrive, are they able to transfer into the MASC program?
Yes, certainly. So once a supervisor has agreed to supervise a student and of course also fund the student, because MSc will require funding, then transfer is possible, and the courses we have taken until that point will also be transferred to the MEng program. So that is very much possible, and it happens quite often.
Okay, great. Thank you. Chris, some more questions about supervisors. Are supervisors, you said fall was your biggest intake. Are supervisors typically only accepting students in the fall term for research-based programs?
No, people accept, because it depends when their grants come in, or sometimes they have to accept students at different times of the year. So it usually happens, all the time, like basically all year. I would just mention that fall is when we get the most applicants. And so a lot of supervisors will look through the fall list because there's just a lot of people to look at, a lot of options, I guess, during that period. But for the most part, no, people will get accepted all the time, right? So it just really depends on when the funding comes in.
Yeah, Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much. Cindy, you mentioned that you started off your program as an MASD student in quantum information, and we have a prospective applicant who's interested in what that means. What's involved in a collaborative quantum information MASD program?
So the requirements would be slightly different because I would have to fulfill the requirement of both the QI, the quantum information, or the IQC community requirement, as well as the ECE. So I think I can find the link below the website, the requirement for that. So I would apply through the ECE, but then you would just have to talk to a faculty member of the IQC community. And yeah, so I think the quantum information only accepts research-based students. So you would have to find a faculty and be in contact for that. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We have another admissions question, specifically about English language proficiency and exemptions. So how does a student find out if they are exempt from providing an LP? Do they have to get a letter from their university saying the language of instruction was English, or how does that work?
So all of the ELP exemption conditions are listed on our website. Unfortunately, we don't accept the letter from the university saying that the mode of instruction is English. If their university is listed or their institute is listed on WED, where it says that the only mode of instruction in that institute is English, then we accept that as an exemption. I would recommend all of the applicants to go over the onto the website and go through all the ELP exemption conditions that we have over there. And if there are some queries or any questions or any doubts, they can contact the admissions coordinator directly to ask their questions.
Excellent, that's great, thank you. And maybe one of our, Catherine or Jen or Emily could post a link in the chat to those LP.
I will do that.
Yeah, Pavneet can do that, great. And we'll make that link available to you guys as well for your review.
Yeah.
Chris, you talked about minimum funding guarantees, and I think some of our prospective applicants don't really understand the concept of minimum funding and how it works. Does it apply to domestic and international students? Could you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, okay. So minimum funding. So first of all, this only applies to PhD and Masters of Applied Science students, both domestic and international. It applies to both. This is the amount of funding that the minimum amount of funding you must receive from your advisor in order to do your work, do your research. Okay. So this is like the least amount of money that you're going to get. You might receive more depending on the supervisor, depending on the project and so on, but you're guaranteed to receive that minimum level. So it was $18,000 for a Masters of Applied Science student and $24,000 for a PhD student. Again, if you're an international PhD student, you also receive this extra money, the IDSA, to sort of level out the increased tuition costs. This does not apply to MEng. MEng students are self-funded.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Pavneet, another admissions question. If a student is applying to two programs, for example, in two even separate faculties like ECE and CS, which is computer science, do they need to create two separate application profiles?
Yeah, they're supposed to create two separate applications. Even if they're applying within the same department, but for two different programs, they still need to create two different applications for that.
Okay, great. So that's two applications. There's an application fee for each program then. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. We're having a lot of questions about finding a supervisor. So maybe Chris and Kankar, you guys could speak. Chris, maybe you can go first. Finding a supervisor, how do you know if a faculty member is currently accepting students? Can students continue to contact faculty members after they've submitted their application, that kind of thing?
Yeah, okay, so I think Cindy mentioned this, like the first place I would go to see if a supervisor is accepting graduate students is their personal website, right? Some of them will list it, some of them, as mentioned, don't update it, but that's the first place I would go. And And so that, besides that, how do you know? You really don't know. Besides, unless they've posted it on their website, there's really no other way to know if they're accepting students besides, contacting the faculty member themselves. And so, sorry. And then what was the other part of the question? Sorry, I've forgotten.
So after you've applied, can you continue to try and connect with a faculty member?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, maybe you won't be able to have their list, their name might not show up on your requested supervisor because that's part of the application process. But yeah, you can still definitely keep contacting professors. And, some people like it when you contact them. I mean, it depends on the person, but some people like it when you contact them after you apply because it shows you're serious. And it also makes it easy for them to find your information because you're already in the system. They can go and look at your application package immediately without having to, exchange a bunch of emails to get more and more information.
I would like to add on that. So I think in your application, you would have to put down maybe 2 or 3 professors you're interested in working, but your profile is in the system, and then other professors within the faculty is also possible for them to reach out to you and conduct interviews. So I personally did experience that. So do have your applications in, and then professors that are actively looking for students might reach out to you.
Yeah, that's great advice from both of you. Thank you very much.
Sorry, can I just add one more thing?
Mm-hmm.
One thing that is a good way to get in contact with a professor, if you say you're interested in computer architecture, to say an area, if you know someone at your home institution that knows someone who works in computer architecture at the University of Waterloo, they can be a great way to introduce you. So, if they know, because, the people, as Kankar was saying, people in this department, there's very, a lot of well-known researchers in this department. And so, Professor X at your institution might know Professor Y at Waterloo, and maybe they could facilitate an introduction if you're a really good student. So that's a good way to maybe reach out to professors.
Great, thank you. Chris, you mentioned that, or maybe it was Kankar mentioned, this is a very competitive program. We'd like to see top quality students. So what is kind of the acceptance rate? How many students per cycle, maybe annually might be the best way to do it, is ECE accepting into each of its programs?
Okay, these numbers are approximate. I don't have them off the top of my head. So this is what, as far as I know. For the MN student, I think we're looking at close to 20 to 25%. For MASC, it's about 10%. For PhD, probably also close to 10%.
Okay, great. So very truly competitive programs. Pavneet, we're having a lot of reference questions today. So some more questions about references, specifically about what makes an academic reference. So do academic references have to be from the institution of their undergrad study, or if they did maybe a USRA at another institution, could that faculty member provide them with an academic reference? And then further to that, if the faculty member is maybe retired, does that disqualify them from giving an academic reference? How do we look for what makes a good academic reference?
Usually in academic reference, we are looking for from a faculty member under whom they might have taken some courses or did some sort of project during their undergrad. Yeah, even if the faculty member is retired, that's fine. We can still accept that reference from them, since the student was under that faculty member at one point of time. Another thing is, like, even if they did undergraduate research assistantship or a project under a faculty member at the institute, we do accept that as well. Yeah, so unless that faculty member is from their institute of undergrad and they did some sort of work under them, either took some courses or some projects or some research, we accept them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Chris, can you talk a little bit about the opportunities for research assistantships and teaching assistantships within the department?
Okay, so maybe the easier one to answer is the teaching assistantship. So we have a pretty well-organized system for TAs, right? So basically, a couple of months before the start of an academic term, all graduate students will be invited to apply for teaching assistant positions. And I think you list 3 courses that you're interested in, first choice, second choice, third choice. And then the instructors, after all the students have applied, the instructors will go and they'll sort of rank of the people that have applied. Maybe they'll interview you, but basically the professors will rank who they want to be their teaching assistants, and then the positions will be allocated based on these kind of combination of rankings. And so it really depends on your supervisor whether or not you can apply for these TA-ships. So, personally, I always let my students apply. I think most professors do. And so basically it means that you're taking a little bit of time away from your research or your coursework to do your teaching assistantship. So RA is a bit different, right? So again, if you're a Master's of Applied Science or a PhD student, your job is really research. That's your main reason. The reason you're doing those degrees is because you want to do research, right? I mean, that's the opportunity that you're doing. And so you were paid. The reason you get that minimum funding we were talking about earlier is because you're getting paid to do research, right? More than anything else. Okay, so that's kind of the RA there. Now, there are sort of one-off opportunities that will arise for a Master's of Engineering student or MN students. So like maybe a professor has an industrial contract, a short-term industrial contract, and they need someone to work on the project. They might advertise a short-term position, but I would say those are relatively rare in terms of opportunities.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Havneet, a question about English language proficiency tests. So if we have an applicant who potentially has an LP score that's a little bit lower than the required minimums, either a TOEFL or an IELTS or whatever, what course of action is open to them?
So, ECE department already uses like a reduced minimum requirement than rest of the university. So we require our applicants to at least meet the minimum requirement for ELP. This is just to make sure that our applicants are successful in the program. So we don't accept like students with low ELP because we already have lower ELP levels as compared to the rest of the university courses.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you very much. Chris, can you talk a little bit about the possibility for probationary admission for maybe someone who's been out of school for 10, 15 years? So maybe their undergrad marks weren't that great, but they have, industry experience.
So probationary in the sense that they don't have the grades, but they have all this
work
okay
experience.
Yeah. So for again, I would say that depends on the degree. For MEng, I think because it's quite competitive, it would be difficult, but it really depends on the admission committee. So the committee that's evaluating your application, maybe they'll take this into account. But I would say that it's sort of a case-by-case basis, sort of as Pavneet was saying earlier. With the research-based degrees, there again, I would say that happens maybe more frequently, I think, because what happens is say you're interested in embedded systems or what the case may be, and you have a lot of experience in embedded systems and a professor is working in embedded systems. They say, well, they don't have the best grades, but they have this really great experience. They'd be perfect for this research project that I want them to work on. And so they might, make a case for why you would be successful in that program to allow you to get accepted. But actually probationary is not something we do, right? So this would be a case where the professor would override the minimum requirements by, kind of advocating for you that you would be successful. But we don't have probationary in the sense that like, we'll let you in, and if you do well in the first term, you leave probation. That doesn't exist at Waterloo, or at least in ECE.
Okay, great, thank you. We've had a question for our two student panelists. Sydney, maybe I'll start with you. Prospective applicants are kind of wondering why you chose Waterloo. What's life on campus like? Do you feel safe when you're there? How has your experience been at the University of Waterloo?
Mm-hmm. So as I have mentioned, I completed my undergraduate study here, so I know the community quite well, and it was very easy access for me at the time of the application for me to just interview with the professors and sort of visit their labs to see the actual environment. Regarding the life in Waterloo, Waterloo is a pretty small town compared to like GTA area, like the greater Toronto areas, but it has all the essentials you need. It's a very concentrated area, I would say. Like your the radius of your activity area wouldn't really go too far, probably within like 5 to 10 kilometers with like in all directions would be your activity zone. But then you would get all like really anything you can think of, you would be able to acquire in such regions. We have like tons of bubble tea places near campus. Yeah, so it's relatively, I would say it's quite safe city. It's yeah, and the students really just focus on studying, so it is a very study town, I would say. Yeah.
And Anshul, do you have anything you'd like to add to that about life in Waterloo? And
Yeah, I would just share my experience. Like, being an international student, when I came to UW, it's been 2 years, and my experience till now has been amazing. Students, like, our campus has a lot of facilities for you to do group studies. It has great library facility, and the community, like student bodies and the other students and the professors, are very friendly and easy to approach. And apart from studies, there are a lot of spaces where you can hang out. We have Grad house where we have board games, and we have in campus where pack and safe, where you can do extracurricular activities, games, and all that stuff. So in all, Waterloo is a very decent and a good city to live in, and the students and the professors and the faculties at UW are amazing. They are always in helping nature.
that's great. Thank you both. Pavneet, do any of ECE's programs offer or require a GRE for admission? Is that something ECE requires?
No, we don't need GRE exam scores for admission. It's not one of the requirements for admission.
And if a student uploads their GRE score, is it available?
They can upload their score, but it won't make any difference in the application.
Okay, great. Chris, can you talk a little bit about program duration? So the MEng length versus the MASC length?
Yeah. So I would say MEng, I believe it's listed as a four-term degree, so 4 terms. I mean, you can do it in 3, but most students do it in 4. And so I'd say that maybe a typical MEng student would be something like two courses in their first term, 2 courses per term over 4 terms. I would say that's kind of maybe a standard thing. I mean, of course, you might overload a term or underload another one depending on which courses you want to take. For the MASC students, I would say a typical sequence would look like this. So again, there's variations, but usually 2 courses in the first term, 2 courses in the second term, 1 course in the third term, and then research for the last year, peer research for the last year. So it's MASC is 24 months, I would say, on average, and an MEng is 16 months. So it's an 8-month difference between the 2 degrees. PhD is, of course, longer, 4 years.
Great, thank you very much. Chris, I'm going to come back to you. In terms of admissibility, what is the likelihood of a student getting admission straight out of undergrad versus a couple years of work experience? Is there a preferred sort of path?
I would say it's neutral. I would say, sometimes it helps, sometimes it hurts. Also depends on the kind of work you're doing, right? If the kind of work you're doing is relevant to the type of research you want to do, if you're a good undergrad student and you apply for a graduate degree, there's going to be demand there, right? We're always looking for good students, good quality students. But if you go off and do some industry experience and it allows you to kind of really focus on what you like, it allows you to write maybe a more focused research statement, that can also be beneficial. But it really depends on the person. I would say it's not like we have a checklist that says, oh, they've done industrial experience, this ranks them higher, right? It doesn't work that way. It really depends on the individual person.
Great, thank you. Pavneet, Cindy had mentioned that she went from an MASC directly into a PhD. Some of our prospective applicants are wondering if it's possible to switch from an MEng degree to an MASC degree.
Yeah, so it is possible to switch from MEng degree to MASc degree in the first term, considering if they have a willing faculty member who's willing to take them under their supervision. Because it totally depends, they might have to reach out to the faculty members, and if a faculty seems like they have enough funds and they're willing to take that student under their supervision, they can change the degree from MN to MSc.
Perfect. Oh, yeah, Chris?
I just want to say that it does happen, and Kankar mentioned this, that MN students switch to MSc, but it's not, again, it's not a unilateral decision. It's not, as Pavneet said, right? You have to get a supervisor to agree to fund you. So maybe this is not the politically correct thing, but I wouldn't count on that, right? If you're applying for an MEng, you should count on the fact you're going to be doing an MEng. Maybe you might be able to find a master's supervisor, but I wouldn't count on it, right? It's not guaranteed.
I also wanted to mention, if you're an MEng or an MASC student and you realize research isn't for you, you do have the opportunity to also go down, not down, but to an MEng degree and just finish up coursework. So that's also an option once you're in.
Oh, fantastic insight. Thank you all. Chris, if a student takes a few courses as a non-degree student, can they use the credits earned towards a future degree, or at very least use those courses as a demonstration of an aptitude towards doing research in a certain area if maybe their previous grades weren't stellar?
Okay, well, certainly it can show aptitude in terms of research, right? If you take courses for non-degree courses and you do well in them, it shows that you have aptitude. It can show that you have aptitude in that area. Now, will it override your minimum requirements? No, right? You still have your minimum requirements are based on your degrees. The other thing about transferring credits, we cannot double count courses. So if they're truly extra, we can try to transfer. They can potentially be transferred. Again, depends on the courses, the institution, and so on. It's potentially possible. But if they've been counted towards any sort of credential at all, then they cannot be double counted at Waterloo.
Perfect, thank you. For the MEng review process, maybe Pavneet, I'll start with you, and Chris might want to weigh in on this as well. Is the undergraduate institution taken into account when looking at the student's average? So, a 9 out of 10 from one university is maybe weighted a little differently than an 8 out of 10 from a different institution.
So the undergraduate average is evaluated on the basis of where, I'm talking about the international students. So it is evaluated on the basis of where the institute is situated. I mean, from which country it is. For example, I get these sort of questions a lot, like how do you evaluate the scores, considering each institute has their own way of grades, like grading the. So what I will say is that while reviewing the applications, we go through the transcripts. It's also a case-to-case basis. So we go through the transcripts, and we also go through the transcript legend to see that how the given GPA is evaluated and how we can convert the GPA to the percentage. So after students submit their transcripts and scorecard, we go through those transcripts and we convert their GPA into average. So by looking at the transcript legend of that particular institute. If that's the question, if that answers the question really well.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Chris, did you want to weigh in at all?
Yeah, I would say yes. I mean, the answer is yes. The institution matters, right? So there's institutions that we know very well. Certainly all the Canadian institutions, for the most part, we know and we have a long-standing relationship with them, and we know kind of what the training is like at those institutions, and it makes a difference, right? We know what the kind of background we're getting with those students. There are thousands and thousands of universities out there, right? Some of them we have no experience. We have never had applicants from some of these universities. And so we do look at past performance of students from that university in our programs, right? So that does affect the decision. So the answer is yes, we do take into account as best we can. Sometimes it's difficult where you did your degree.
Okay, excellent. I think we have time for one more question, and Chris, I'm gonna hand it off to you. You mentioned when contacting prospective faculty members, make it a personal email, like when your name is in a different font, it's not a personal email. So students are wondering, how can you make it not feel like a cold message? Like if the student is genuinely trying to make that contact, what are some of the things they can do to really show that interest?
Yeah, this is a really difficult question, to be honest with you. And I definitely sympathize with you guys out there trying to get the attention of professor, because you get a lot of emails, right? And so sometimes at a certain point, it just becomes difficult to respond to them all. I don't know. I mean, I guess what do I look like? What do I look for? So certainly some sort of personalization, maybe familiarity with what you've done. It's not just a generic email. Like you've written something about particular my research area, right? So for example, I don't work in, I don't know, let's say integrated circuits. So if you say you're interested in integrated circuits and you send me that email, I'm not even going to look at it, right? So all I can say is, try to tailor the message to the professor and also be succinct, right? We get a lot of emails. If we see like a huge long email, it's difficult to spend a lot of time reading these emails, because I'd spend all morning reading emails of these long ones. So get to the point, make it personal. If the professor is interested, they will get back to you, right? It doesn't take a lot for me to scan an email, see if it's someone I want to converse with, and start up a conversation. But it's a difficult question. It's a very difficult question, and I don't really have a great answer for it. So I'm sorry about that.
It is a difficult question, and I appreciate what you said, and I'm sure our student attendees do as well. So we are at 2 o'clock, and this wraps up our Ask Me Anything event for the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. I would like to thank all of our panelists for their time and insightful answers in today's questions. Don't forget, if you haven't registered for our Waterloo Engineering Graduate Studies Alumni Panel, which is happening this Friday, November 5th from 12 to 1 Eastern Daylight Time, you can still sign up to attend. We will add the link and the information into the chat now. This virtual event will feature alumni panelists from our graduate programs to speak about the impact their graduate degree had on their career path. Once again, to our panelists, thank you, and we look forward to welcoming all of you to Waterloo Engineering soon. Have a great afternoon.